This story is titled, After Returning from Vacation to Another City, I found my mom's new fiancé using my things and sleeping in my bed in our family home. But instead of making a scene, I simply called my father, who quickly fixed everything. Hey Reddit, my name is Tyler, and I'm 26 years old. I work as a structural surveyor for construction projects, which means I make decent money inspecting building foundations and structural integrity for major developments. The work pays well, but it requires me to travel constantly. I'm essentially on the road for most of my career. 9 months ago, my father passed away after a brutal 6-year battle with early-onset dementia. The disease basically destroyed our entire family during those years. My mom is in her early 50s, and I have a sister who's married with kids. Up until Dad's illness, I thought we were a pretty normal, close-knit family. Here's where my story gets complicated, and looking back, I can see how every decision I made with good intentions ended up setting me up for what happened later. When I was 21 years old, I bought my first house. Since I was young and traveled constantly for work, the banks were hesitant to give me a mortgage despite my decent income. I had been making good money but had absolutely zero credit history, which made lenders nervous about someone who spent 4 weeks out of every month away from home. My mother offered to co-sign for me, which seemed like a lifesaver at the time. However, she insisted on being added to the title as well, not just as a co-signer. Just in case something happens to you on those dangerous job sites, honey, she explained. At the time, this made complete sense to me. I was working around heavy machinery, unstable structures, and construction sites where workplace fatalities weren't uncommon. Plus, she was doing me a huge favor by co-signing, and having family as backup seemed like smart planning rather than a mistake. My dad was already starting to show early signs of his illness around this time, though we didn't fully understand what we were dealing with yet. I wanted someone I trusted to be able to handle my affairs if I got seriously injured or worse while working in such a high-risk environment. Looking back, it seemed like responsible planning for a young person in a dangerous profession. You might be wondering how someone my age could afford to buy a house in the first place. The truth is, I've been working my ass off since I was 15 years old. I spent every summer working construction jobs, and I worked throughout college while other kids were partying and enjoying typical college experiences. I saved every single dollar I could get my hands on, living as cheaply as possible and focusing entirely on building up enough money for a down payment. I bought the house for $195,000. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but the structure had solid bones and good potential. Over the next several years, I spent countless hours and significant money dumping improvements into the property, slowly transforming it into something I could be truly proud of. But the basement became my absolute masterpiece, my pride and joy. I spent 4 years of weekends, totaling about $60,000 in materials, building everything myself from scratch. I installed custom flooring, a high-end sound system, a regulation billiards table, a handcrafted bar, and every other detail you could imagine. Every wire, every piece of trim, every fixture was installed by my own hands during weekends, when I should have been resting from 70-hour work weeks. About 5 months after my dad's funeral, my mom started dating this guy named Vincent. He's in his mid-40s and works as some kind of business consultant. The man dresses like he's constantly closing million-dollar deals, always wearing expensive suits and driving around in luxury vehicles. From the very beginning, he had this annoying habit of calling me son constantly, which immediately rubbed me the wrong way. Vincent also seemed to have very strong opinions about my travel schedule and lifestyle choices. He would frequently tell me that I needed to settle down, stop traveling so much for work, and focus on building more traditional relationships. This guy had known me for maybe 2 weeks and was already lecturing me about how I should be living my life. Everything about his personality and approach just felt wrong to me. But I could see that my mom seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years, so I made the conscious decision to keep my mouth shut about my concerns. As the months went by, Vincent started showing up at Mom's house more and more frequently. He began staying overnight regularly, and soon he was having opinions about literally everything in Mom's life. He would comment on her house, suggesting that she deserved better than living surrounded by all these painful memories of Dad's illness. Vincent started talking about how Mom should consider downsizing to something more manageable, something that would be easier for her to maintain. Over the next several months, Vincent essentially moved himself into my mother's life completely. I started noticing his clothes hanging in her closet, and he began having opinions about everything from her cable package to her daily routines. He suggested that she deserved to downsize to a place that wouldn't constantly remind her of the difficult years she'd spent as a caregiver. Every family dinner became this incredibly awkward dance where Vincent would lecture me about responsibility and family obligations. He would go on and on about how I needed to be more present, more supportive, more engaged with what Mom needed during this transition period. My mom would sit there nodding along with everything he said, as if this guy she'd known for a few months was some kind of relationship expert who understood our family dynamics better than we did. What made this whole situation even more frustrating was that my sister Brooke absolutely loved Vincent from day one. She kept telling everyone that Mom deserved someone who truly appreciated her and recognized all the sacrifices she had made during Dad's illness. Even my Aunt Linda jumped on the Vincent bandwagon, constantly singing his praises and talking about how wonderful it was that Mom had found someone who treated her so well. I kept telling myself that this whole thing was probably just temporary. I figured that Mom was simply enjoying the attention and companionship after spending years as a full-time caregiver to someone with dementia. I convinced myself that once the novelty wore off, she would start to see through what I perceived as Vincent's manipulative behavior and obvious attempts to insert himself into our family. Besides, I was completely focused on my work at the time. I had landed this massive project in Detroit that was going to set me up financially for years to come. The contract involved overseeing foundation work for a 45-story mixed-use tower, which was exactly the kind of high-profile project that could really advance my career in structural surveying. I was putting in incredibly long hours and dealing with enormous responsibility, so I didn't have much mental energy left to worry about Mom's new relationship. After 4 grueling weeks in Detroit, I was finally coming home. I had been overseeing foundation work on that massive 45-story mixed-use tower, and the project had been absolutely exhausting. The responsibility was enormous. Any mistake in the structural surveying could compromise the entire building's integrity. I was running on maybe 3 hours of sleep, completely drained from weeks of 15-hour days, and all I wanted was to get back to my house and collapse in my basement sanctuary. I just wanted to decompress with some billiards and music in the space I had spent years perfecting. Of course, my flight was delayed, which only added to my exhaustion and frustration. By the time I was finally driving home, I was beyond tired and just desperately looking forward to being back in my own space, my own bed, and especially my custom basement where I could finally relax and unwind from this intense work period. When I pulled up to my house, I saw something that made me think I was having some kind of breakdown from sleep deprivation. There was a sold sign on my front lawn. Not just any lawn, my lawn in front of my house, the house I had been paying a mortgage on for 6 years. I sat in my car for several minutes trying to process what I was seeing. Maybe I was at the wrong address somehow. Maybe this was some kind of nightmare brought on by exhaustion and sleep deprivation. But no, there was my address clearly visible, my driveway, my mailbox with my name still on it. Everything was exactly where it should be, except for that impossible sold sign planted right in the middle of my front yard. Then I noticed there was a moving truck parked in my driveway. Through my front windows, I could see guys inside my house loading up furniture. Not just any furniture, my furniture, the pieces I had carefully selected and paid for over the years. I got out of my car and walked toward the house in a complete daze, feeling like I was moving through some kind of surreal dream. One of the movers was actually carrying out my custom bar stools, my hand-carved maple bar stools that I had special ordered from a craftsman in Vermont. Each one of those stools had cost me $450 and had taken 7 weeks to complete. I had waited months for them to be finished, and now this random guy was just carrying them around like they were cheap yard sale furniture. "Excuse me, what the hell is going on here?" I asked the mover, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "House sale, man. New owner wants everything cleared out today," he replied casually, like this was just another routine moving job for him. New owner. Those words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I felt the blood drain from my face as the reality of what he was saying started to sink in. Someone else was the new owner of my house. Someone else had bought the property I had been working to pay off for 6 years. I stormed into the house, my heart pounding and my mind racing to try to make sense of what was happening. There were moving boxes everywhere, and professional movers were systematically loading my belongings onto their trucks. My living room was half empty, with pictures already taken down from the walls. It looked exactly like someone was being evicted from their own home, except this was supposed to be my home. I headed straight for the basement, hoping against hope that maybe this nightmare would stop there. Maybe my sanctuary, my masterpiece, would somehow be untouched by whatever insanity was happening upstairs. But when I got downstairs, I encountered something that made my blood boil instantly. There was Vincent, sitting in my leather recliner like he owned the place. Not just any chair, my Herman Miller Aran chair that I had saved for 9 months to buy. He had his feet up on my custom coffee table, the remote control in his hand, watching my 80-inch OLED television. He was sitting there calm as could be, while my entire life was being packed into boxes and loaded onto trucks upstairs, acting like he had been living in my house for months. "Why the fuck are you in my house?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of exhaustion and rage. Vincent sighed like I was some teenager throwing a tantrum over nothing. "Your mom sold it. You don't need all this space and luxury at your age. Too much responsibility for someone who travels constantly," he said with this condescending tone that made me want to punch him in the face. "What the hell are you talking about? This is my house," I shouted back at him. "I built this entire basement with my own hands. Every light fixture, every piece of flooring, every single wire behind these walls. I installed all of it myself." Vincent actually had the audacity to laugh at me. "Kid, your name's not on the deed anymore. Your mom refinanced months ago while you were traveling. Something about you being unreachable and not contributing to payments," he said with this smug expression on his face. Then he pulled out his phone to show me what looked like official documents. "House belongs to me now. Legal transfer of property between consenting adults," he continued, scrolling through what appeared to be legal paperwork on his screen. The room started spinning around me as I tried to process what he was telling me. Apparently, while I had been working 15-hour days making sure a skyscraper wouldn't collapse and kill people, my mom had been quietly refinancing the house under her name only. According to Vincent, she had claimed to the mortgage company that I was unreachable and wasn't contributing to the mortgage payments. Both of those claims were complete bullshit lies. I had been making automatic mortgage payments for 6 years straight, and she could contact me anytime she needed to. "She can't do that," I said. Though even as the words came out of my mouth, I knew she probably could. She was on the title, she was the original co-signer, and legally she probably had every right to refinance the property without my involvement. "Actually, she can," Vincent replied, settling back into my chair like he was getting comfortable for a long conversation. "Your mom decided you didn't need a bachelor pad at your age. Time to grow up, son. Maybe think about getting your own place, starting a family, instead of playing with toys in a basement." That's when I completely lost it. Something inside me snapped after weeks of stress, no sleep, and now coming home to find some stranger had stolen my entire life. "Get out of my chair," I said, my voice deadly quiet and controlled in a way that should have been a warning. "It's my chair now, kid," Vincent replied, not seeming to understand how dangerous this situation was becoming. I took a step toward him, my hands clenched into fists. "Get the hell out of my chair," I repeated, louder this time. Something in my voice must have finally gotten through to him because he actually stood up, raising his hands like I was the one being unreasonable in this situation. "Look, I get that you're upset, but this is done. Your mom made her decision. Maybe you should focus on building a relationship with your family instead of building man caves," he said, still trying to lecture me, even while backing away from my obvious anger. "You have 15 seconds to get out of my house before I throw you through that fucking wall," I told him, and I meant every word. 4 weeks of accumulated stress, no sleep, and coming home to find some stranger stealing my life had pushed me way past my breaking point. I was absolutely ready to put this guy in the hospital. Vincent grabbed his jacket and headed for the stairs, but of course he couldn't leave without getting in one last condescending comment. "Your mom's going to hear about this attitude, son. Real mature behavior," he said over his shoulder as he climbed the stairs. I followed him upstairs, watching as he supervised the movers loading the last of my belongings into their trucks. The movers wouldn't even make eye contact with me. They had paperwork showing Vincent as the legitimate owner, so everything appeared legal and proper from their perspective. My own belongings were being stolen from me, with completely legitimate moving contracts and official documentation. "Where's my mom?" I asked one of the movers, desperate to get some answers about what the hell was happening. "Lady who hired us is at the lawyer's office finishing up paperwork," the mover replied. "Should be back in an hour or so." I couldn't wait around for an hour. I couldn't stand there watching them load my entire life into trucks for another minute. I grabbed my work bag from the car, literally the only thing that was definitely still mine, and drove straight to the cheapest motel I could find. I needed to get away from that scene before I did something that would land me in jail. I called my mom immediately when I got to the motel room. I needed answers, and I needed them right now. "Tyler, this is for the best," was all she could say when I confronted her about what had happened. "For the best? You gave my house to your boyfriend," I shouted into the phone, unable to control my anger anymore. That's when she started screaming back at me, and what she said next cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. "I sacrificed 6 years of my life, caring for your father while you built your little man cave and played with your toys. Do you know what I gave up while you sent checks from hotel rooms? Mom, I was working to support us, I tried to explain, but she wasn't having any of it. To support yourself, she yelled back. You built your perfect bachelor pad while I changed diapers and cleaned vomit. Vincent was there more for your father's final months than you were. He helped me lift him. He drove us to appointments. He was actually present when we needed him. You showed up to the funeral and went back to work like nothing happened. Vincent deserves this house more than you do. Her words felt like I'd been slapped across the face. She was right about one thing. I wasn't there physically during Dad's decline. I had been working 70-hour weeks across 4 different states while she dealt with the day-to-day reality of his condition. But that money I was making kept us all afloat. It paid for his care, kept the lights on, covered all the medical expenses that insurance wouldn't touch. I couldn't be there physically because my job required me to be on site for major infrastructure projects. If I missed a deadline, I lost the contract. If I lost the contract, we lost everything. But as her words started sinking in deeper, something else began to bother me. She said Vincent was there for Dad's final months, helping lift him and driving to appointments. But wait, Dad died 9 months ago, and Mom only started dating Vincent 5 months ago. That means this piece of shit was hanging around my dying father, probably planning his next move while Dad was still breathing. The timeline didn't add up at all. Mom had been seeing this guy while Dad was still alive, letting him play the helpful family friend while he was actually scoping out our family's assets. Now I was wondering what else I had missed while I was busting my ass to keep this family financially stable. Those floors alone cost me $9,500 and took 4 months of work, I said, trying to focus on something concrete instead of the growing realization that this betrayal ran much deeper than I had initially thought. Exactly my point, she shot back. $9,500 that could have helped with your father's medical bills instead of your hobby project. The conversation ended with her hanging up on me. No apology, no explanation beyond her belief that Vincent deserved my house more than I did. Like 6 years of mortgage payments and 4 years of building something beautiful with my own hands meant absolutely nothing to her. So here I am, lying on a mattress that feels like concrete in a room that smells like stale cigarettes, trying to figure out what the hell just happened to my life. My own mother stole my house and gave it to some guy she's known for 8 months. Everything I built, everything I worked for, everything I accomplished, gone. I've already called a lawyer, but honestly, I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do from here. Here's the thing that's really eating at me. I know you can't just sell property that's not entirely in your name. Being a co-signer doesn't automatically put someone on the title with full ownership rights. But the problem is that my mom's name actually is on the deed. She wasn't just my co-signer anymore. When we set up the original mortgage, she had insisted on being added to the title as a co-owner for emergencies. Like an idiot, I agreed to this arrangement because she was doing me such a huge favor with the co-signing, and it seemed like reasonable protection in case something happened to me on those dangerous job sites. How do you fight your own family in court? How do you prove a house is rightfully yours when your name got removed from the deed through what appears to be completely legitimate refinancing? The lawyer says, we might have a case for fraud if we can prove that Mom lied on the refinancing documents about me being unreachable or not contributing to the mortgage payments. But that kind of case could take months to resolve and cost thousands of dollars in legal fees. Even then, there's no guarantee we'd win. Has anyone here dealt with family members stealing property? Is there any way to fight this kind of situation? I'm so fucking lost right now and could really use some advice from people who might have been through something similar. Hey again. It's been about a week since my original post. Holy crap, the responses I received, thanks for all the support, seriously. I wasn't expecting this many people to actually read through my entire story, let alone offer advice and encouragement. Also, thanks to everyone calling me an asshole for abandoning my dying father. Really needed to hear that criticism right now when I'm already at my lowest point. But let me clear some things up because apparently I'm being painted as the villain in this situation. My dad's dementia wasn't just forgetting names or getting confused about what day it was. We're talking about full-blown, late-stage nightmare stuff that completely destroyed our family's quality of life. He would wander outside at 2 a.m. in his underwear during winter storms, not recognizing any of us and thinking we were intruders trying to break into his house. There were violent episodes where he would physically attack my mom because he was convinced she was trying to hurt him or poison him. He would throw things at us, scream at shadows in empty rooms, and refuse to eat for days because he was absolutely convinced we were trying to poison his food. This nightmare went on for 6 brutal years, and it wasn't just difficult. It was completely overwhelming and heartbreaking for everyone involved. I was 21 years old when it started. fresh out of college and trying to build a career in a field where missing deadlines means you never work in the industry again. Structural surveying isn't like other jobs where you can call in sick or work remotely when family emergencies happen. When you're overseeing bridge construction and something goes wrong, people die. When you miss a structural inspection deadline, entire multi-million-dollar projects get shut down and you get blacklisted from the industry permanently. The responsibility is enormous, and there's absolutely no flexibility when it comes to being present on site. For the record, I sent money home constantly throughout those 6 years. I paid for medical equipment that insurance wouldn't cover, expensive adult daycare programs to give mom breaks from caregiving, and experimental treatments that cost thousands of dollars out of pocket. I took out personal loans to cover some of Dad's care expenses and maxed out multiple credit cards paying for house modifications to make the environment safer for him. But if I had stayed home to help with hands-on caregiving full-time, we would have lost everything financially. I was the only one in the family making decent money. Mom's part-time job at the school district barely covered groceries, and my sister was struggling with her own young family and couldn't contribute much financially. The guilt was absolutely crushing every single day. I'd be standing on construction sites in freezing rain or blazing heat, and my phone would buzz with texts about Dad's latest episode. Dad tried to leave the house again last night, and we couldn't find him for 2 hours. He didn't recognize me this morning and called the police saying I was robbing him. He threw his medication at the wall and says we're all trying to kill him. Every single text felt like a knife in my chest, but I had to keep working. I had to stay focused on the job because that's what was keeping our family financially stable during an impossible situation. The weird thing is that my mom seemed to completely understand this impossible situation at the time. She never complained about my travel schedule or asked me to quit and take a local job that would have paid half as much. She would always say things like, "Focus on your career, sweetheart. Your father would be proud of how hard you're working for this family." I genuinely thought we were functioning as a team. Her providing the hands-on care that Dad needed, me providing the financial support that made that level of care possible. I guess she was building up resentment the whole time, keeping score of every day I wasn't physically present while conveniently ignoring every dollar I sent home to support them. Now, about Vincent. This guy showed up right after the funeral like a fucking vulture. Actually, now that I think about it more carefully, I'm pretty sure I saw him at the funeral itself, which was weird because nobody in the family knew who he was at the time. But apparently my mom had been in full dating mode with him even while my dad was still alive. Vincent drives around in a brand new Lexus that's maybe 7 months old and wears suits that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He always seems to have unlimited cash for expensive dinners and weekend trips to wine country with my mom. But whenever anyone asks him specific questions about his consulting business, he just gives these incredibly vague answers about helping companies optimize their operational efficiency or streamlining business processes for enhanced productivity. It's corporate word salad that means absolutely nothing when you actually think about it. What kind of consultant has unlimited free time to play house with my mom and take her on romantic getaways every other week? Real consultants are incredibly busy people with demanding clients, constant meetings, and strict deadlines. This guy's schedule seems to revolve entirely around taking mom on trips and giving me unsolicited life advice about settling down and being more responsible. I never liked this dude from the moment I met him. He started calling me son from day one and lecturing me about family responsibility. Son, maybe you should think about settling down instead of chasing work all over the country. Son, your mother needs more support during this difficult transition. My mom ate up every word because finally someone understood her sacrifice and appreciated what she'd been through. Vincent would hold her hand during family conversations and nod sympathetically while she talked about how hard caregiving had been. He kept telling her she deserved so much better than she'd gotten, that she had given up too much of her life, and that it was time for her to focus on her own happiness for once. Anyway, a couple of days ago while I was sitting in this motel room trying to figure out my next move, I started thinking about how this whole situation went down without me having any clue what was happening. My sister Brooke talks to mom constantly. They're on the phone like 4 times a week discussing everything from grocery shopping to family gossip. How did she not mention that mom was getting serious with some guy? How did she not think to give me a heads up that Vincent was practically living at mom's house and making major decisions about her life? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that my own sister had to have known something significant was happening. There's no way mom could have been planning this house transfer without Brooke being aware of at least some of it. So I called her yesterday, thinking she would see how completely insane this whole situation was and maybe offer some backup support. Wrong fucking move on my part. Honestly, Tyler, good for Mom, Brooke said when I explained what had happened. She wasted 6 years of her life while you lived like some perpetual bachelor. Vincent actually showed up when it mattered. When's the last time you took Mom to dinner? When's the last time you bought her something nice after everything she sacrificed? Vincent does that stuff. It became clear pretty quickly that Brooke has always resented my income and the freedom that comes with my career. She's been stuck in suburban mom life since she was 20 years old, working part-time as a dental hygienist and never making more than $38,000 in a year. She sees Vincent's attention to Mom as proof that I'm a selfish son who cares more about building projects and career advancement than family relationships. I even called my Uncle Frank, who's Mom's brother, thinking he would see how completely insane this situation was and maybe offer some perspective or support. He definitely sees that something's wrong, but for completely different reasons than I expected. There's something seriously off about that Vincent guy, Frank told me when we met for coffee. Business consultant, my rear end. You know what real consultants look like? They're stressed, overworked, constantly on their phones with demanding clients. This guy's got unlimited time to take your mom on 4-day weekend trips every other week. The math doesn't add up at all. Uncle Frank owns an accounting firm and handles the books for about half the small businesses in our town. So he definitely knows what legitimate business operations look like. If this guy's hiding income or running some kind of financial scam, the feds would love to know about it, Frank continued. Tax evasion and money laundering charges come with serious prison time. That conversation got me thinking, but honestly, the thing that hurts me the most in all of this isn't even the legal complications or the family betrayal. It's my basement that everyone keeps dismissing like it was some meaningless hobby project. People keep calling it a man cave, like it's some beer fridge and dartboard situation you'd see in a college dorm room. This was 4 years of my life and represents the best work I've ever done with my hands. Every single weekend for 4 years, instead of dating or going out with friends or having any kind of social life, I was down there with power tools learning advanced carpentry and electrical work. I installed custom parquet floors that I researched for months, ordering samples and learning installation techniques before laying every single plank myself. I wired a professional-grade sound system after taking courses on home audio installation and spending weeks running cables through the walls. I saved up for months to buy a regulation chrome billiards table that cost me 5 months of overtime shifts. This wasn't some hobby room where I went to avoid responsibility or hide from family obligations. It was proof that I could take something raw and ugly and transform it into something extraordinary. It was my signature on the world, my statement that I could make something lasting and beautiful with my own hands. When I brought dates over to the house, they were genuinely blown away by the craftsmanship and attention to detail. When my colleagues from work saw it, they couldn't believe I had built everything myself without professional help. It represented years of learning new skills, solving complex problems, and creating something that was uniquely mine. That basement kept me sane during the worst years of Dad's illness. When I would come home from devastating work trips, especially after receiving those heartbreaking phone calls about his latest episodes while I was hundreds of miles away, when everything in our family felt chaotic and completely out of control, I could go down there and work on building something perfect. Every detail was planned and executed by me. Every wire, every piece of trim, every light fixture was installed during weekends when I should have been resting from 70-hour work weeks. Now Vincent is planning to gut the whole thing and turn it into a storage room. 4 years of my life reduced to impractical use of space. My lawyer thinks we actually have a strong case moving forward. Mom lied on the refinancing documents about me being unreachable and not contributing to mortgage payments. I have 6 years of automatic payment records and email chains that prove she could contact me anytime she needed to. That's mortgage fraud, plain and simple, like most of you pointed out in your responses. The lawyer says if we can prove she knowingly provided false information to the lender, the entire refinancing could be voided and the property would revert back to its original ownership status. But it's not going to be easy or cheap to fight this. We need to subpoena the lender's records, get sworn statements from people who can verify I was reachable during the refinancing period, and basically build a comprehensive paper trail proving that Mom deliberately lied to facilitate this transfer. The lawyer estimates it could cost me anywhere from $18,000 to $35,000 in legal fees, and that's assuming everything goes smoothly. If Vincent fights back with his own lawyers, those costs could easily double. Meanwhile, Uncle Frank is digging into Vincent's finances with his contacts in the financial industry. If this guy is scamming the IRS or running some kind of money laundering operation, Things could get very interesting very fast. I'm trying to stay optimistic, but honestly, some days I wake up in this motel and wonder if I'm ever going to get my life back. But I'm not giving up on this fight. These people messed with the wrong guy, and I'm going to see this through to the end. I'll update you all as this situation continues to unfold. Thanks again for the support from those of you who actually understand what I'm going through. Hi, it's me again, and it's been 3 weeks since my last update. This whole situation just keeps getting worse, but also better at the same time. I don't know how else to describe it. This entire mess is completely fucked up. But some major developments have happened that give me hope. So Uncle Frank went full detective mode on Vincent's finances. And guys, this dude is shady as hell, but not exactly in the way I originally thought he would be. Frank started by checking public records for Vincent's business registration. And it turns out his consulting company is registered in Nevada. Now, that's not automatically suspicious since lots of legitimate businesses incorporate there for tax purposes. But when Frank dug deeper, he found some seriously concerning patterns. The business has no physical office address listed anywhere and no employees on record. There are no legitimate client contracts that Frank could verify through his industry contacts. But here's where it gets really interesting. Vincent has been claiming significant business expenses on his taxes. We're talking about expensive meals, travel costs, even a portion of his car payments, all written off as business expenses. But there's no corresponding income documentation that makes any sense for the level of spending he's been doing. This guy is claiming $9,500 a month in business expenses, but only reporting $32,000 a year in total income. Frank showed me printouts he'd obtained through his contacts in the financial industry. Either he's the worst businessman in history, or he's hiding income from somewhere else, Frank explained. But here's where Frank's theory gets really interesting. He doesn't think Vincent is some sophisticated criminal mastermind. Frank thinks Vincent is actually a small-time scammer who got in way over his head with this scheme. The expensive lifestyle, the brand new Lexus, all those lavish gifts for mom and weekend trips. Frank believes Vincent has been using credit and loans to fund it all, basically living like he's wealthy while actually drowning in debt. Your house wasn't just about getting a free place to live, Frank explained to me. This guy needed legitimate assets to stabilize his financial situation. Banks were probably starting to ask serious questions about his debt-to-income ratio, and he needed something substantial to point to. But Frank's investigation uncovered something even more disturbing. It turns out Vincent has been planning this type of scam for quite a while, and my mom wasn't his first victim. Frank found records showing that Vincent had briefly dated 3 other women in neighboring states over the past 4 years. All of them were recent widows, and all of them had either significant property or substantial savings accounts. Those relationships ended when the women got suspicious about his stories, or when their families intervened and started asking too many questions. Which means my mom wasn't his first target, but she was definitely his biggest and most successful score. A house that I bought for $195,000 that was now worth nearly $320,000 with all my improvements and the equity I'd built up over 6 years, plus whatever additional equity mom had contributed over the years. My lawyer filed fraud charges against both mom and Vincent last week, plus an emergency injunction to void the house sale entirely. The mortgage fraud case is actually moving faster than we expected because mom's lies on the refinancing documents were so blatant and easy to prove. She literally signed papers claiming I was unreachable for consultation, while I have email threads with her from the exact same time period discussing family matters and asking about dad's condition. When someone transfers property using demonstrably false information, that's conspiracy to commit fraud, my lawyer explained. Your mother can't claim ignorance when we have documented evidence she was in regular contact with you during the period she claimed you were unreachable. Meanwhile, Frank dropped a tip to his IRS contacts about Vincent's financial discrepancies and suspicious business practices. Turns out when someone suddenly acquires expensive property that they can't document legitimate income for, that triggers automatic federal investigations. The IRS doesn't mess around with tax evasion, especially when it involves potential fraud schemes. 5 days ago, everything exploded in the most satisfying way possible. Federal agents showed up at my house that Vincent had been living in like he owned the place. It turns out this piece of shit had been staying there full-time since stealing it from me, probably enjoying every minute of sitting in my custom basement while I rotted in that disgusting motel room. The feds seized his financial records right there in my living room, froze all his bank accounts, and started interviewing his previous girlfriends in other states as part of a broader investigation. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing that he got arrested in the house he stole from me, dragged out in handcuffs from my own front door. The federal agents also found evidence that Vincent was planning to use my house as collateral to get even bigger loans, then probably skip town before anyone caught on to his scheme. But the idiot got greedy and rushed things, which is exactly why Uncle Frank was able to spot the financial inconsistencies so quickly. Since Mom lied on all those refinancing papers, the whole house sale is getting thrown out completely. You can't steal something through fraud and then legally sell it, apparently. That means my house is coming back to me very soon. But Mom is in deep shit too. She's being charged as a co-conspirator because she knowingly participated in transferring fraudulently obtained property. Her claim that she didn't know Vincent was running scams fell apart completely when investigators found text messages between them discussing how to hide the house transfer from me until it was too late to challenge it. The prosecutor thinks Mom genuinely believed Vincent was successful and that they were just bending rules rather than committing serious federal crimes. But ignorance isn't a legal defense when you're actively helping someone commit fraud and lying on official documents. Mom called me yesterday, and I've never heard her sound that desperate in my entire life. "Tyler, I need help. Vincent is under arrest, and they froze all our accounts, even mine. They're saying I helped him commit fraud." "Sounds like you made some poor choices," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and controlled. "I didn't know how serious this was. I thought his business was just unconventional," she pleaded. "Tyler, they want to prosecute me. I could go to prison. You knew enough to hide the house transfer from me. You knew enough to lie on mortgage documents. You made your choices," I replied. "I was angry about your father, about feeling abandoned. Vincent said you didn't deserve the house, that I'd earned it through my sacrifice. It felt reasonable at the time," she said, her voice breaking. "And now you're facing federal charges because you decided to steal from your son to impress a con artist," I told her. "Tyler, please. I made a mistake. If you don't help me, if you don't testify that I was manipulated, I could lose everything. You already lost everything when you chose a criminal over your family," I said. And then I hung up. I immediately felt this weird mix of satisfaction and emptiness after that conversation. Brooke has been texting me constantly, begging me to have mercy on Mom and think about family bonds and forgiveness. But where was that family loyalty when they were all supporting Vincent and telling me I was selfish and irresponsible? The lawyer says I'll get my house back within the next month. All the stolen money will be returned, plus damages for the illegal transfer and reimbursement for my legal costs. Vincent is looking at 4 to 6 years in federal prison for tax evasion and fraud. Mom is facing 3 to 4 years as a co-conspirator, though she might get less time if she cooperates fully with the federal investigation. I should feel completely victorious, but honestly, I just feel tired. I never wanted to destroy my family. I just wanted my house back and some acknowledgement that what they did was wrong. But I'm not backing down from this fight. These people made their choices, and now they get to live with the consequences. Hopefully, in my next update, I'll be telling you about finally getting to go back to my house. Wish me luck. Hey, it's been about a month since my last update, and I figured it's time to close this whole crazy chapter out. A lot of you have been asking what happened next, so here's how everything wrapped up. First off, I got my house back. Officially, legally, and permanently back in my name only. Walking up to my own front door with the keys in my hand after 3 months of hell was honestly one of the best feelings of my life. No more crappy motel rooms, no more living out of a duffel bag, and no more wondering if I'd ever get my life back to normal. But man, seeing what Vincent had done to my place was like getting punched in the gut all over again. The main house wasn't too badly damaged. He had obviously been living there, but he hadn't really changed much structurally. He'd used my kitchen, slept in my bed, and probably went through all my personal belongings like the creep he was. But the damage was mostly superficial. However, it was my basement that really broke my heart when I first saw it. This piece of garbage had actually started tearing apart 4 years of my work. About a third of my custom parquet flooring was ripped up and thrown in a pile like it was worthless trash. He had disconnected my entire sound system and stacked the expensive speakers in a corner like they were garage sale junk waiting to be hauled away. My custom bar was partially dismantled. He'd removed the maple top that I had spent months perfecting, and it was just leaning against the wall with scratches and gouges all over the surface. It looked like he had started spray painting over my charcoal wall coverings with this ugly beige color. Just straight up vandalism of something I had built with my own hands over years of weekends. The guy was literally trying to erase every trace of the work I had put into that space. probably planning to turn it into some generic storage area or whatever Vincent's idea of practical use was. But here's the thing. He didn't get very far with his destruction before the feds grabbed him. Maybe 35% of the damage he was planning to inflict. The billiards table was fine, just shoved against a wall out of the way. Most of my lighting fixtures were still intact and functional. The bar could definitely be rebuilt with some effort and new materials. Looking at the damage objectively, I realized this was fixable. Painful and infuriating, but definitely fixable with time and effort. I took 4 weeks off work, the first real vacation I'd had in 6 years, and threw myself completely into restoring everything he had destroyed. Honestly, it was exactly what I needed psychologically. Instead of sitting around being angry about what had happened to me, I poured all that rage and frustration into fixing everything with my own hands. I found matching parquet planks from the same supplier I had used originally. I rewired all the sound system connections, making them even better than they were before. I rebuilt the damaged sections of my bar and spent weeks refinishing the maple top until it was even more beautiful than it had been originally. Every wire I reconnected was proof that some loser con artist couldn't permanently destroy what I had built with my own skill and dedication. Every plank I replaced was evidence that I could overcome this betrayal and make something even better than before. The strangest part was how therapeutic the whole restoration process turned out to be. When I had originally built this basement, I was dealing with Dad's illness and all the stress and guilt that came with that situation. Now I was rebuilding it after having my entire life stolen and then returned to me. Both times, working with my hands in that space helped me process emotions and situations that I couldn't handle any other way. During those 4 weeks of restoration work, I got regular calls from the prosecutor's office with updates on how the legal case was progressing. Vincent ended up pleading guilty to avoid a longer trial and more serious charges. He got sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for tax evasion, fraud, and conspiracy. It's not as long as I was hoping for, but it's long enough that his life is basically destroyed forever. A federal conviction means he'll never get decent employment again once he gets out. He can't own property, can't run businesses, and will be under federal supervision for years after his release. His scamming days are definitely over. Mom's situation was more legally complicated. Her lawyer worked out a plea deal where she got 20 months in federal prison plus 4 years of probation. She also had to pay back all the money she had helped Vincent hide, forfeit her house to cover restitution payments, and basically lost everything she owned. The prosecutor said she got a lighter sentence because she cooperated fully with the investigation once she realized how completely screwed she was. Brooke called me during Mom's sentencing, crying and begging me to visit Mom before she went to prison. "She's family, Tyler. She made a mistake, but she's still your mother," Brooke pleaded with me. "She stopped being my mother when she chose a criminal over her son," I told her firmly. "Actions have consequences." Brooke tried the guilt trip approach, talking about Dad and how disappointed he would be seeing our family destroyed like this. But you know what? Dad raised me to work hard, build something meaningful with my hands, and stand up for myself when people try to take what's mine. I think he'd actually be proud that I didn't just roll over and let them steal my life. The money situation worked out better than I had expected. Insurance covered some of the restoration costs since Vincent's vandalism was considered a criminal act. The court ordered both Vincent and Mom to pay damages for the illegal transfer, plus all my legal fees and additional compensation for the stress and disruption. I ended up getting back significantly more than I spent fighting this whole thing. But honestly, the money was never really the main point of this fight. It was about not letting people walk all over me just because they thought they could get away with it. It was about not letting family members think they could steal from me just because we share DNA, and they assumed I wouldn't fight back. Aunt Linda tried reaching out a few weeks ago, wanting to heal the family, and suggesting that I was being too harsh and unforgiving. It's funny how she didn't want to heal anything when she was taking Vincent's side and supporting Mom's theft of my house. I told her that the family had healed itself by removing the people who thought stealing was acceptable behavior. The only real family member in this entire mess turned out to be Uncle Frank. He stopped by last week to see the restored basement, and he was the only one who had my back from the very beginning. He was the only one who saw through Vincent's act and took action to help me. "You did good, kid," he said, looking around at my rebuilt paradise. "Sometimes you have to choose between being family and being right. You chose right. The basement looks incredible now, honestly better than it ever did before. The new sections blend perfectly with the original work, and I even made some improvements during the restoration process. But now every detail represents not just my original vision, but my refusal to let anyone destroy what I built." When I'm down there now, shooting billiards on my chrome table, listening to music through my perfect sound system, and looking at the light reflecting off my restored floors, I don't think about Mom or Vincent anymore. I think about the fact that I fought for what was mine and won. I think about how I turned the worst experience of my life into proof that I can rebuild anything that matters to me. Some of you have asked if I feel bad about Mom going to prison. Honestly, no, I don't. She made her choices every step of the way. She chose to believe Vincent over her own son. She chose to lie on legal documents. She chose to help a criminal steal from her family. Every consequence she's facing is something she earned through her own actions. Vincent played her for 8 months, convincing her that she deserved what I had worked for. I played the long game and used the legal system to get justice. Sometimes the house wins, especially when you refuse to fold when you know you're right. Brooke still sends occasional texts about family forgiveness and moving forward. I reply with photos of my basement and my property deed with only my name on it. So yeah, my house is mine again, my basement is better than ever, and I sleep great at night knowing that nobody can ever take this from me again. Thanks to everyone who followed this insane story and offered support. Hope it helps someone else recognize the red flags and fight back when people try to steal their shit.